This week on Rockstar Superhero. Today on the show, I feature Kyle and Cliff from Lesotho, a Boston-based instrumental triumvirate of considerable talent, grace, and musical expression. I will go so far as to say I love this band. Their stories are sweet, the way they sort of fell into each other's musical laps is an interesting nugget, and the music they create has the feel of a band with decades more experience than this upstart creation that just happened on accident during the initial COVID outbreak in early 2020. Their music is dynamic, confounding even, impossible to replicate, and really just freaking great stuff. Put on your headphones, prepare for a tasty experience, and if you want to jump deeper into the fray, perhaps a fine wine or brew will give you that extra push into their magical mystery. I had a great time talking to these guys, and I won't say anything more because, well, you need to hear it from them. So, this is Lesotho, the instrumental high flyer on the Rockstar Superhero Podcast.
If you asked like 10-year-old me if I would like be in a band, like I'd probably laugh how we're laughing right now. Honestly, I would say like, ironically enough, you know, we were talking a little bit beforehand about like religion. So my first experience with music, period, was actually singing in the children's choir at like 6 years old at the local parish in like Hyde Park.
Wow.
And that led to chorus at school, which then led to band at school, which then led to like high school. And then they offered like a guitar workshop. So then I was like, all right, wait, I know how to sing. Now I'm learning how to play guitar. Girls like it when guys can sing and play guitar. Mm-hmm. And so came, you know, the high school garage band, did that for a little bit, just kind of playing the 3-chord Sum 41 covers.
Sure.
And then after that, like for me, at least like after high school, just no music for like, I don't know, like 4 years pretty much.
Wow.
And it wasn't up until I actually settled into the career that I have now, where I kind of like was like, all right, like, you know, I need something to do in my free time other than to like, you know, drink beer and smoke pot with my friends. So I ended up actually buying a drum kit from a guy who like sold me dime bags at the time.
Oh my God, that's great.
And that led to me starting a band, playing drums, which I still do now. Yeah. And, you know, I would have never thought like that I'd be a part of this sort of YouTube generation, because even though given my age at this point, I feel like I'm such a baby in this entire universe, in this industry. Yeah. So it's there's a lot of influence from a lot of different places, from the church all the way through like the different methods through which I learn music. So it's quite interesting, especially being in this city, because, you know, there's Berkeley and there's bands like Caspian and artists like that. Yeah. Not even just necessarily in this genre, but in all genres that like, you know, there's a bit of a kind of grassroots sort of movement that existed, I think, during that period of time, like early to mid 2000s.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's interesting that you say the whole church thing and the evolution of yourself as a musician. How did you take that 4 to 5 year time span off? Because I can't imagine that as a young man, you know, post high school, whatever, college age. I can't imagine that's the era where you would set that aside. You know, I feel like you'd lose your chops and being a drummer, right? Is that what it is? You just had to focus?
Yeah, for me, I just had to focus because, you know, I was the type of person, like, I actually didn't take a loan to go to school.
Oh, wow.
I got like financial aid, I think, but, you know, at the time it was very minimal. So I worked full time. I actually worked 2.5 jobs full time. So like 2 full-time jobs. And
I was going to say, how do you do a half job?
Yeah. Essentially 2 full-time jobs and then a part-time job while going to school full-time.
That is God.
Yeah. So, I mean, pretty much anything having outside of like eating, breathing, and studying,
Yeah, there's no room, right?
Yeah,
I felt
just
like
wasn't
that
room.
in college too.
There wasn't necessarily a lack of desire, but I would say that my relationship with music was much different back then. You know, like I kind of alluded to earlier, like for me, it was kind of like a cool thing to do versus like an actual creative endeavor.
Right.
Which is when I revisited it, you know, basically in my mid-20s, it was like sort of this fresh thing that it was like, okay, like here I am. I sort of have this foundation of skills. How can I use this to express myself?
Yeah.
And,
that makes a
years
lot
later,
of sense.
here we are.
So neither of you have the pressure of this being your full-time gig, right? I mean, you have quote unquote normal jobs, normal lives outside of this, and the band is something you do as an artistic endeavor that may go somewhere.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's how I classify it. Although for me, like I'm gonna play music until I die. At this point, that's just how I feel. Like I'm just always like, whether it's this or elsewhere, like always, it's always going to be a part of who I am, my identity.
Yeah, that's cool. Kyle, you know, I didn't hear quite as much the depth of your sort of musical history. How did you start playing again? Can you give me a little?
God, it was funny. Like, I think it was middle school.
Wow.
And, you know, like I had a friend group, and a branch off of that friend group was the musicians. And then I started hanging out with like the drummer, and I was over his house one time, they were practicing, and I became friends with the guitarist. And then the guitarist was like teaching me songs in the background. And then, you know, speed up like a few months from there, I was like playing with them in a full band. And then, you know, it was like Red Hot Chili Peppers or like Sum 41 or Green Day or whatever, you know, we wanted to play at the time.
Yeah.
You know, we played like Battle of the Bands at my high school and stuff like that. So I think that's where it all started. And then, yeah, just jumping into lessons, and I kind of learned how to, you know, subtly like read music through my teacher. And I was like really getting into that for a little while and playing like jazz a lot. Not intensely, like I wasn't like in love with jazz, but I think the reading and just playing my instrument in like an academic setting was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I ended up actually going to Salem State, which is pretty close to where I am right now. Actually, I'm back here. So I went to Boston after Salem and I'm back. But I went in there as a guitar major and learned how to read a little bit more, you know, enhance that skill while playing in a band, a few different bands at the time. Like I had one pretty similar to this that I first started. It was like kind of like my baby when, you know, when I first started writing music and like driving with it, really pushing it creatively. And I was in love with post-rock music. I still am. It has like this really, you know, like piece of my heart is like post-rock. In the end, it's always going to come back on that, and ambient and instrumental music. And yeah, I just, you know, we played a bunch of shows. That was my first push into like actually playing live shows, getting a bunch of pedals. I like really stocked up on that, got my Telecaster going. So it's like a version of me was born in that time, you know? And I gave it all up, like Cliff said. I took a year or two off, and after that band split, I was like, you know, I got to rethink what I want here and like who I am, you know, like a reevaluation. And then I met Cliff, you know, after trying to get back into it for so long. I kept trying it with people and it wasn't working out, like whether it was like differences in musical taste or whatever. And that was a long road. I felt like when I picked back up the guitar again, it was like this foreign thing. And I had been playing classical a lot, and like I got really into classical music and sight reading and was doing that, you know, I was totally fine there and comfortable. But the second I picked up like a guitar with a drummer and a bassist and another guitarist, it was like this pressure would like consume me, you know? So I had to like learn how to break out of that, you know, and slowly evolved out of that shell. And when I met Cliff, I feel like Cliff was a big stepping stone for me, because he was like the man that like wouldn't place judgment, you know, wouldn't be the one like hindering my creativity, and would be able to roll with it as long as we needed to roll with it. And I think we spent like a year just kind of playing in another band, and then finally picked up at Lesotho. So
Wow. That's really fascinating. Yeah, I love what you're saying because it reminds me so much of how the best bands sort of slow roll into it's almost like a marital relationship, right? You guys are together and you have to learn how to you have to learn how to get along.
Bro.
Yeah, we're doing it. We did it.
But I mean, you have to. It's true, though. I know. I mean, it's something to make fun of, but it's so difficult to be in a band because you are sort of like, I said, married to these different people, and you have to have some similarities. But the things that make the music incredible, the thing that makes Lesotho, what I've heard is you three who do something only you three do. If that makes sense, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's kind of the backbone of it for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
How do you get from Boston to Lesotho? And I know that's a silly way to ask the question. I mean, I'm certainly familiar with the country. I've never been there, but what drew you to give this name to your band? And does the name have a deeper meaning for you guys than you let on?
I don't know, Kyle. Should we give away the secret?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Before we say that, I want to say that like the band itself has become what Lesotho is. It's almost like we didn't have a name for so long, like 6 to 8 months. We were writing these songs and doing it, and it's just the culmination. And now you put a label on it, and it doesn't become the country anymore. It doesn't become anything. It becomes this brand, if you will.
Yeah.
So Cliff, you want to tell them where we actually got the name from?
All right. So our drummer Zach, well, all of us to a certain degree, are purveyors of Pokemon.
Oh,
and so there is a gym boss for those familiar with Pokemon, whose name is Lesotho.
Oh my God!
And so that, believe it or not, that's actually not the only Pokemon reference.
I'm so old. I'm so old.
I know. Well,
I love it.
Yeah, but that actually, it was just an idea that we kicked around and we thought it was cool. In addition to the country, like I like the fact that it's sort of like a double entendre. Like you first hear it and most people are like, oh, Lesotho, like Africa, Lesotho.
Yeah.
But then we're like, but then it's also this. Right?
Yeah. It's also this other thing.
Which is really cool. And we get to sort of have that quirk. And I think you'll find a lot of that. Not only with the way that we sort of present things artistically, but even in the sound in certain ways. Like we definitely like add our own wrinkle to things that like you would think would be like traditional or might mean one thing or sound one way. But then you listen to it or hear it or see it another way. And it's like, oh, wait.
Interesting.
It's on a new light. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, the reason I asked this question actually is deeper. And it is about sort of the secret identity behind band names, right? Because if you think about it, like if you go back into, say, Hebrew history, for example, names always mean something, right? For example, Zach, which is also my son's name, means God remembered. Okay. So I was thinking about Lesotho and what does it mean, right? And for example, I believe it's the only country in the world that is surrounded by one country. Like it's an island inside of a country, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And I thought maybe there was something symbolic in there, like I said, a hidden secret. But if you think about that, it's almost like you were divinely appointed to name the band Lesotho so it would sound like what being surrounded is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would have never thought of it that way.
Yeah,
but absolutely. It makes complete sense. Yeah.
Right? You're going to be writing all the material from now on thinking, how are we
surrounded?
How are we? Right? Because
you're not wrong.
Right?
That's a good viewpoint to take writing and artistically. Yeah.
No, it's great. I mean, you guys are here to promote the new album. It's called Summer Wars. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That's right.
So is this going in tandem with the sort of the secret behind the name when the Summer Wars? Is it like Pokemon Wars? Is it black? Is it black versus right? Is it black versus white? Is it South African versus right? You see what I'm saying? There's all this imagery that gets conjured up. And I thought there's got to be something deeper in here. And you're probably just going to tell me, no, we just picked two words out of a hat.
Well, no, I mean, I came up with it.
Okay.
essentially like it kind of goes back on like a lot of the shows that I was watching, the music I was listening to, and the games I was playing, especially over the pandemic. You know, it has a lot of those narratives are like based on a season and a feeling. You know, so you couple these like times in your life with a feeling, like whether it be nostalgia or anger, and then you play that season out. You know, so Summer Wars was like a good. Like it sort of hit, like when we were writing it, it was midsummer, and a lot of it was just a battle, you know, in a lot of ways. And it was a battle like emotionally and with, you know, with loving and hating, all sorts of things, you know. I
all against the backdrop of the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, literally, like this was the meeting with these guys and rehearsing was the only thing that I did outside of work where I was able to interact with people.
It was like, a fucking battle, man. Like just doing the grind of it all. You know, you're secluded for so long, and then, you know, I'll sit down and like brainstorm these ideas and get one shot to make them work with you guys, you know, or make some sort of magic happen each week that we go into the practice. And the fact that it was working, you know, was awesome. You know, like just a revelation in itself. So it had its ups and downs like the entire time, and that's a big chapter in my life personally. So I like to think about it as like, a lot of the narratives I was, you know, playing. So I get to play a lot of good video games, watch a lot of good movies in that time, you know, and a lot of those had that narrative of like, this emotion is captured in this timeline. You know?
Yeah. I love the opening track, man. Now it's called +1 × 2. Is that correct?
That's
so correct. Yeah, man, that melancholy opening and that slow build just evolves into a full-on power struggle, right? But there's that cool groove in there, and it's really dense. But there's a lightness to it that I found surprising. It has this. It's glassy. You know, and it takes the listener. I mean, I know it's cheesy to say this, but it does. It takes the listener on a really emotional journey. And I know those phrases have been used before, but I'm not being trite here. You know, these thoughts came out of me as I listened to the song, and it really fits squarely into what I call headphone music. That what you've created, the whole album is complete headphone music. Do you think that's a fair description?
I would say so, for sure. I think, especially when we got to the studio after writing and ready to actually, you know, track these songs and put everything together the way that we wanted it. I think it was really important for us to capture a lot of the energy that we would generate through the sounds, especially given the fact that like we're an instrumental project, there are no words. So a lot of the sort of feelings that we have to convey have to come through how we sound.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think for me personally, like my intention heading into the studio was to just immerse like as much as we could sonically, like whoever would listen to this, whoever we gave this to, like we wanted them to listen to it and just be like, oh, like I'm falling into this, like here we go. And so I appreciate that. I take all of that headphone music thing as a compliment, because that's what we want you to get in the zone when listening to our stuff.
Yeah. What's your thoughts, Kyle?
I guess so. Explain more what you mean by headphone music.
Well, okay, so I'm a lot older than you guys, and being a drummer, I've been deeply fascinated with instrumental music my whole life. I really could not care less about lyric content. I mean, I really, truly don't care. And I mean, I know it may be unfair, but it's just how I am, right?
No, I get it. There's a bunch of heavy bands I listen to, and I know not a lick of the words. And it's just like, whatever. I mean, there are a few that I do and enjoy and sing along with, but I totally empathize with that for sure.
Yeah. And so, and it makes sense too, because you're in an instrumental band, right? But I've listened to it, and so here's what I've always done. So back in 1985, okay, when I was your age, I used to sit on this couch at my friend's house. I would go over, we'd buy a bottle of Lambrusco, which is a really dark red wine. and we would put basically what we would call a weird album on. We would put something like by Laurie Anderson or Kate Bush or an early Peter Gabriel record. And we would turn off all the lights. We would drink wine, and we would listen to this music in the dark.
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. You know, like some of my favorite bands are like that.
Yeah.
You know, in a lot of ways, like just sitting down and like immersing yourself in it was a huge goal. Like what Cliff said of like going into the studio. I mean, one of my fondest memories is just kicking back with one of my friends and listening to like Meat is Murder by the Smiths, you know? So it's like all those Smiths album, I can sit back and just like, you know, nothing else is going on. You have a beer or whatever. You just like kick it and listen to it, get in that head zone, you know? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know what you mean. Yeah.
And that music will be with you the rest of your life. And because of that moment, Kyle, I mean, and you'll want to tell your kids about it. I mean, so recently, right. So recently, as an example, in 1985, when I was sitting there, I discovered a new artist. It's Jean-Michel Jarre, the French composer. And he's a techno composer, meaning like it was all electronic music, right? Early electronic music.
Yeah, I was going to say that was like prime time.
Prime time.
Right. That's like the golden age of electro, Euro house, all that stuff.
Yes. And so he has an album called Zuluk. And I would highly recommend you and any listener check this album out. It's called Zuluk. I don't remember what year it came out, but the first time I heard it was 85. And the first song, I can't remember what it's called. It's Techno something, like Technicolor, but it's anyways. And it's all soundscape, and it's all sampled human voices and Adrian Belew playing guitar, Kyle. It is mind-blowing. And it's just perfect. I mean, if I were a stoner, I'm not. But if I were a big stoner guy, I would just be fried and baked out listening to this because it's that kind of thing.
Idea.
It is. It is a great thing. And so the other day, I took my 10-year-old daughter. My kids were all in bed, but I have a 10-year-old daughter. And she sat with me on the couch. We turned off all the lights and we put on Zuluk. And she's like, Dad, it sounds like Star Wars. You know what I mean? And it was just, it was this incredible bonding moment. And I know this sounds silly, and I know this sounds even pathetic, but you know what? On my deathbed, I can say to my daughter, baby, you know, when you listen to that, just remember me. Those silly little things, they're so overly cheeseball romantic, but they're beautiful. And I implore everybody to do that. And so when I heard your music, going back to you guys, I was like, oh, this is headphone music. I can sit in the dark and I can embrace it. It's just simple. I don't need to be told what the story is. I'm going to make my own story.
Nice.
Yeah, hell yeah. I love that, man. Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to view music, you know, in a lot of ways. It's a beautiful way. I mean, some of my best memories are that, you know, in a lot of ways, is like being with friends and you isolate that moment and you like put it away, you know? Yeah. Nice one. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, it is. It's timeless, and like I said, it's romantic. You know, it's really easy to fall in love with an idea because the music that comes with the idea, so to speak, when it's as lovely as yours is, it's really easy to just stay there. It's really easy to be reminded of that moment. So, for what it's worth, I just thought I'd share that with you.
No, thank you,
man. Yeah, thank you so much, man. That's the highest compliment we could get. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. Getting back to the record, though, I want to say this too. There's a definite musical journey because that last piece, I wrote it down. Let's see, To See with Eyes Unclouded. To me, is a perfect ender. There's a feeling. It's almost like a madness to it, and a brutality. Right in the center of it. There's this sort of chaotic moment that seems to happen, if I remember it correctly, but the ending feels like an ending. It feels final, and I wrote down the words bookend. In other words, you're one of the few bands that has done this. I don't know why nobody does this anymore, but you guys did it. You bookended the album. You started it right and you ended it right. And don't get me wrong, all four pieces are great. But those two pieces work so well that if you didn't like the album, you would love the album. Does that make sense? It ended so well. I just wanted to share that. But how does that make you feel when you hear somebody gets off on it like that?
That's something special,
motorcycles.
Yeah, God, they rip down these streets like crazy. Middle of the night, it doesn't matter. That track is special because, especially, you said that bookend piece. I was like,
yeah,
the song is kind of bookend in a way, and that last melody that comes in that feels like a finisher, of the album or whatever. That song was written up until that point, and then that one like little chord progression or whatever it is, that riff at the end, kind of came in my head while I was driving, and I'm like punching it out in my keyboard on my phone, and I'm like, dun, 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 dun. I'm like punching it out, and I get home and I play it. I'm like, cool, let's try this. I think the whole beginning to end of the album, that was the intent. And I feel like writing these songs, I feel like we always tend to do these things, like whenever we group songs and write them, that they're like, that they feel almost like a journey, a trilogy. Like if we had, I don't know what a 4-song trilogy would be called, but it's like quadrilogy. Yeah. Exactly.
A quadrant
of music. Yeah. We want to like create that. We want to create that. So we're not pushing anything. We're not forcing anything. And everything's there. That should be there in its right place.
Yeah.
Giving it enough time to breathe.
If I'm not mistaken, did we like had only just finished writing that song before going to track it? I think it was like the week before or something like that. Absolutely. We were like, all right, like this is what we're gonna have.
That's specifically
with regards to the ending, I think as well.
The ending.
I think Kyle just came to practice rehearsal that one time. It was like, all right, here's what I have for an ending. And can you make this work? And I was like, yeah, dude, just big chords.
Yeah.
Which is what I say for pretty much everything. But
So do you guys write as a duo, as a trio? How does it work?
But all of the above.
Okay.
Like sometimes I'll be right here in this seat, like cranking it out, and I'll come into an idea that I really like, whether it be a beginning, middle, or end of the song. And then I'll bring it to them, or we'll be working on something that's already kind of got fuel in it, and then we'll get onto the beginning, middle, or end of it.
Yeah.
We'll reorder things depending on where we think they fit best, and whether they make sense or bring the feeling out that we're trying to get to. I think, I think that's a really like crucial part to our sound in a lot of ways. Is like
we go through a lot of riffs.
A lot of
I would describe us as churning a lot. There's always ideas kicking around, being muscled and shaped and formed. And sometimes we might stick with it and other times we don't. Or maybe even we'll revisit it and then flesh it out a little bit more. I feel like we really, Kyle and I specifically, I think along with Zach, and him being such a talented drummer, that kid.
Yeah, he's a great player. He's a great player. Definitely, and I'll be the first one to tell you, right?
You being a drummer, me too. I think with the I feel like we each imagine us each as a circle. I think the very center of that Venn diagram with the three circles is like so like intense.
It's Lesotho.
Right, exactly. It's us. And I think to get that, like we really each have to hone in.
Yeah.
I mean that plus again, like I think like having ideas brought to the table and then maybe revisiting, discarding, and coming up with something new.
Yeah.
Like stepping away from something and just coming back to it with fresh ears. Yeah. That for me at least is super important, especially like not being the most I guess experienced bass player, if you will. I mean, I hadn't played bass since that high school thing I was telling you about up until recently. So it's been like 10, 15 years, since I'd even picked up something. I'm just now finalizing like my bass rig and like learning about tone shaping and all of that. So
yeah, but let me say this, Cliff. If you're this good now, just imagine how the band will evolve as you all get better, right? I mean, I hate talking about it as though you're not at your peak. I mean, you are at your peak now, right? But the growth, the evolution of who you are will only happen if you keep playing. I mean, heck, the other day, I mean, in my brain, I listened to something like by Meshuggah and I'm like, I can play that, right? Yeah. And then I sit down behind my kit and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what happened to my chops? Right. You know, it's a strange thing, but I mean, you know, earlier, Cliff, you mentioned this, and I know Kyle feels the same way. When you stepped away, when you come back, you're like, oh my God, I didn't know I couldn't do that anymore. But it doesn't take that long if you're naturally gifted and if you're passionate on top of it. You know, like I said, you guys have formed this thing, you've created this musical sound. You can't help it, you know. Which then leads me to the next question, like, what's the point behind Lesotho? Is there a direction? Did you guys as a trio to get together and do you say, this is the type of music we want to create? You know, it has mixes of this and this, or did you just sort of accidentally stumble upon it?
Well, the story of the band is like, I mean, Kyle and I had been working on a completely separate project.
Gotcha.
Right before the pandemic hit. And I had been playing drums in that project, and he was still on guitar. And so we just happened. I'm not sure if we've ever actually posted this somewhere. I know it's in the press kit, but we essentially just bumped into Zach.
Wow!
Because his dad has a rehearsal, or not a rehearsal space, but just a warehouse space in the same place that we would rehearse. And so we essentially were just like, hey, do you want to come and like play drums? I know you're a good drummer, so like come up. And then, I mean, I think everything just sort of fell into place after a few weeks of just doing that repeatedly.
Yeah.
And for me, music is so important. Like it always has been, ever since I've like been able to revisit it and really use it as a form of expression. Mm-hmm. Like there's not like more than like a day or two that goes by where I'm not touching an instrument or I have something kicking around in my head that I need to write down or bring a new idea to the table. So for me, Lesotho is me sharing this experience with these two individuals, but it will always still be a part of me.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I know that's a really sort of ambiguous, abstract way to describe it, but
no, but I understand it because I'm a musician. Kyle, you were going to say?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what he said. I think on each front, it's like we're all bringing these things and meeting in the middle with them. You know,
yeah,
they all become part of the bigger picture of like what Lesotho is. I don't think we had any intent, or I don't think we had any restrictions on what we sounded like going in, and that's what was really nice for me because I can't. As a guitar player or whatever, I've never been able to like bend to somebody's will of like play this style of music, you know? So I've always just been like, well, this is what I fucking playing right now.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, I don't know, like that's it, you know? So they're two people that appreciate that and allow it to bloom, you know, allow it to roll, and they'll roll with me and we'll kind of roll together in it and figure out and land on the best thing that we can possibly create. And that's the whole reworking and going back and fleshing things out. And then when we get something we really love, like holding on to it for dear life, you know?
Right.
And working that thing. And then it was so cool because bringing it into the studio was like, especially with the last track, well, with all the songs in parts, but I think the last track was like, had that classical guitar intro. Mm-hmm. That was like, we don't know what the fuck this is going to sound like. I literally wrote it before we went into the studio.
Nobody heard it like the day before.
I love it. I love it.
And I was like, I got this thing, and then we're just going to go into the song. And it's like, okay, great.
Yeah.
And you know, those little things with like the piano in the background, it's like even down to the studio is what I'm saying. It's like it all came out and was all part of the bigger picture. So I have faith that like no matter what we do, I'm gonna love playing it and love to play with these dudes. And I think that's the backbone. We just love playing with each other.
Yeah.
In a band and making music together. We love creating too. Yeah. I think that's the huge part of it. We love that feeling. Who doesn't love that feeling of like,
I don't know.
You finally get it. You know, you finally, something comes out and you're like, oh, it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah. There's something I call musical madness, which is when you have an ability like you guys have, natural abilities, these things are just born into you, right? And then you fall in love with an idea and you build on it. You know, both of you have mentioned you took periods of time off, but now that you're in it, right? And then, you know, and most people, as they get older, they start having relationships. And, you know, like me, I have 6 kids, which puts a tremendous...
God bless you, man.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Well, you know,
That's crazy great.
after the first 3, I got divorced, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's, you know, I have 2 families, right? There was separated by 19 years. But I'm proof of my own concept, I think, which is there's a madness in being a naturally gifted musician. You can't turn it off. You don't get to turn it off. You can walk away from it, but you'll be haunted by it. And I'm curious, now that you're in it, can you imagine going back to the old way of doing things?
No, definitely
it does
not.
haunt, you know, it haunts me for sure. And it did, even when I took that break, it was like, it was something that was always on my mind. And I don't go 3 hours without thinking like I should be playing my guitar. I should be like playing a keyboard or something. Or it's madness. Yeah, it's maddening for sure. It's fun. It's fun because when those moments come out and you, oh God, and it works like this did, it makes everything worthwhile. But then you're always itching for the next thing. You know, you're constantly
exactly. It's always on to the next one. Yeah. I mean, I would say I was in a different place. Like when I took time off, just because, you know, like I said, it was just like my head was completely
with school and work,
right? Especially doing what I do, like working in a hospital, medicine, clinical care.
Okay, like, good for you.
And the thing is, you know, it's also that I was very young at the time too, and sort of naive. There's this sort of naivety that comes like with being in your early 20s and, you know, thinking that you might have a decent plan figured out, but then it's like, nah.
That's not it. Or maybe it's a
you know,
great plan, but that's not it. You know, that's
exactly.
not the bottom line. Yeah.
So if anything, I would say that like, I definitely couldn't go back to that, but I think because I went through that phase, that gave me a certain level of confidence that I now carry with me that I didn't have before. Like, even if I don't know what is going to come next for me musically, I know that whatever comes my way, I'm going to be able to shape it. You know, especially with this project and, you know, with these guys, like, you know, especially even now, like going to rehearsal and writing new music and planning whatever our next record's going to be, like just having like fresh ideas that I think the best way to just sort of describe the approach is like just never really putting ourselves in a box. Like it's just always open. Whereas before, I feel like maybe I needed that box to kind of aim towards a little bit.
Right.
Like now it's just like, whatever, man. Let's make it a triangle.
I want to like pivot on that a little bit because there are things in the songwriting thing that are like things that I grab onto that almost are like box-like objects that are like hooks in the music. You know, they're like little things like the beginning of the first track. When we come in and there's just guitar, it sort of breaks out of that somberness and it starts with that rhythm. You know, and then the band comes in. You know, those little things like that really gives us juice to keep going in the song. And then, you know, they're like, melodically is great. And like you can shape the chords all you want, but like, there's a reason why a lot of songs are so catchy. You know, there's those moments, that play with the rhythm or play with the melody or do something unexpected. We're always looking for that, you know, and in our songwriting, especially. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to grab sitting right here, you know, is like I'm trying to grab those pieces of the puzzle that are integral to making it like what it is, you know, and like hooky and the best that it can be, you know. Yeah. It's like listen, and that's what I get so much inspiration from, listening to bands that are like similar to us but different in their own way. So I feel like I'm always on like the outer ring of like the genres, and like I'm listening to like post metal or just metal or classical or even pop, or like I'll put on a show. Like I like watched a shit ton of Studio Ghibli, and they have awesome music in their movies.
They do some of the best stuff ever. It's incredible. Seriously.
And just filmmaking alone it's incredible to watch, and that will give me inspiration all day. So I can listen to, anyway, like they have nuggets in them all over the place that is like, oh, that's a killer transition. What if I could like shape what we've been doing in practice, like the last couple weeks, into like something that does something similar to that or whatever. It's like these little nuggets that you can grab onto for inspiration. Yeah, really important to the process and stuff like that. So.
Something that what you're saying and what I've been thinking about and what I kind of described earlier is when you look back at the album, now it's complete. And obviously we move forward from here. I know you got a live set coming out soon. I know there's a lot of things that are happening.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm glad I mentioned it. But I mean, when you look back at the album, which isn't that far, what sort of hindsight is 2020 do you get out of it? Because like for me, not trying to get religious about it, but one of the things about, for example, the Bible is you read a passage and it speaks to you at that moment or it doesn't, right? It's just, it is or it isn't. That's what's cool about it. And I've had moments where I've read something, I've been like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that. That applies to my life. And then I'll go home and tell my wife and she'll be like, what? And then I'll read it again and I'm like, did I write down the wrong passage? Right? Like it doesn't make
the same way.
Right. It doesn't click at all.
But that's why lyrics and songs like like Radiohead, like we'll have like constant songs. Even that song High and Dry hit me the other. It's like little things like Creep could hit you one way that like in a really like impactful way. It's all over the place. Yeah, I feel it. It's like gospel and it's one way in lyrics and music, Yeah.
No, it is. It is. And so for me, when I hear this, I use the word a lot. I get it, but it is audio cinema. It's cinematic music. We listen to it, we love it, or we're challenged by it, or we're inspired by it, or we're confused by it. But every time we listen to it, those isms get moved around, they get shuffled around, and the music becomes something new the next time. A section is coming, a transition's coming, this 8-bar phrase is coming, but it doesn't change the fact that depending on who you are, at what time of the day you listen to it, it'll blow your mind. It paints new colors.
Yeah, I think it like that's really cool. And I think that maybe we didn't even necessarily intend for it to be that way. Mm-hmm. I guess I've used the term before at practice. Kyle might remember me saying like happy accidents almost. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like where, we might come upon one of those sort of breathtaking moments and it's like, oh snap, we caught it. And then we try to replicate it and it's not quite the same, but then we might do it again later. It's definitely one of those things where, I can see myself revisiting. I mean, even when we play the song sometimes, I find myself sort of adding a different sort of energy based on how I feel that day, or, whether I like worked before or have work after, or like I'm just completely free, or if like, my
you should hear when we're all burnt out and we play the songs. The tempo is like way down and we're just like fucking chilling in it, it's all right.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you catch us at practice one day just playing these songs, it might sound like a stoner version,
right?
Or like even a black metal version.
I love that idea
of the same material. We were even so I actually just got as a birthday gift an acoustic bass, and so we were actually thinking of like maybe even revisiting some of the older tunes, like just acoustic, just for the hell of it, just to be like, hey, let's see what it sounds like.
Yeah, we even said, what was that quote in the press kit that was like, we want to leave the interpretation to the listener,
Of course.
And I think that's exactly what we're not trying to pigeonhole any type of music, like what we are or where we're going. We just want to lay it on the table and be like, whatever mood, whatever you want to take away from this, that's up to you guys.
I like that a lot. David Lynch, the director, does that. He'll never, ever do an audio commentary because he does not want to tell you what the movie's about.
That's a great idea.
And have you considered ever sharing any component of what something is about? Because, for example, today you finally kind of shared out loud, at least with me, that Lesotho is basically a Pokemon character, right? Okay, excuse me. Sorry, pardon me. Yeah, Jin, DJINN. See, I know what I'm talking about.
You got it, man. You're with it. Yeah.
You know what it is? The Jin is a Japanese. It's like a demonic creature. Like the Jin of wind, right?
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
right. where was I going with this?
But we're giving out secrets. And we're trying to stop you.
But does the album? I mean, I know we keep kind of going back, and maybe I'm trying to pound it out of you. But is there one theme? You don't have to tell what the theme is, but is there one theme, or is it just no? That's an accident. If you think there's a theme,
that's what I'm saying, man. Like it's up to you. It's your theme.
Exactly.
Okay. I like that a lot.
We're not gonna say we're this or that.
Right, because and that's the thing. Like you were saying before, almost like the scripture you were talking about. Like if you read a passage, like one day it might really resonate with you, and then other days it might not.
Yeah,
I guarantee some days these songs sound sad,
exactly.
And then other days they'll sound energetic, and then other days they'll sound happy. Or you'll catch a part, you know. And I think you listen to that track "Altar Fire." It's the second one. It has I think it's kind of melancholy throughout the beginning of it. And then there's that chord progression at the end that brightens the whole thing up. So I wouldn't assume that. I think set in its context, that listening to it the first time, you'd be like, yeah, that whole thing was sad, or just a darker feeling to it, you know. But then going back, you might listen to it again and be like, okay, right at that break, it just enlightened a little bit, it lifted that weight a little bit more. So that's why it's hard, and I don't want to put any, context on it necessarily, because it could just change. It could change in a second. It does for me when I listen to it, for sure.
Gotcha.
It goes with our moods at the time.
Yeah. When I read album titles can obviously be distractions. You know what I mean? Yeah, push you off to the side. What were you going to say, Kyle? I'm sorry.
With vocalists. As well.
When so the last question then regarding this is, for example, Altar Fire, right? Why do you name them what you name them? Because my brain, from the beginning, when I saw the track listing, I've listened to the material, I listened to the whole album all the way through. I listened to the whole thing quietly. The album sounds like sacrifice. I can't explain what that means, but that word is the word that came out of my head. And then I looked at the titles. I was like, maybe I'm onto something. But I love how you're not saying anything.
I mean, that's what it means to you.
Right.
And that's the thing. I think that to us, again, I think that's the highest compliment.
Yeah, it's
that you're taking really stuff away from it, Rob. That's the best thing I could ask for, is that you're finding nuggets of you're contextualizing things that are music and sounds, and that's awesome. And really, that's
song titles.
Incredible.
That's all you have to go off of. Is song titles and what you're hearing.
That's the goal. Is a lot of the times they'll come from inspirational bits along the way, and I think that might be from again all the different shows I was watching at the time, like anime and stuff like that. It's that's kind of more of a. It's supposed to be emotional. It's supposed to be dramatic, and I can see sacrificial going into there, especially with the darker themes and everything like that.
Yeah, I think I'm drawn to that. I tend to like dissonant chords, and right. I like to be taken to a place. I don't necessarily want to be dropped off there. Right. I like the resolution of the album. I like that feeling of, okay, I've just watched a movie. It made me feel yucky for a bit, but we're good. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm getting out of it. Since the band is obviously so young and maybe raw and new, what are your longer term plans? I mean, is this we're going to be together, obviously up for the foreseeable future, but I mean, have you guys as a trio said, man, we're in it to win it? Or is this more of a, we're taking it seriously, but this is a pleasurable thing?
I would say right now, even though we have stuff lined up, our goal is to play a show.
Yeah.
It's to get out there. It's one step at a time.
We didn't have a way to share this music for so long. I mean, aside from putting it out, which we're doing, and being able to speak with awesome people like you guys and people who've reached out to us about the record. For me, that live experience, that live setting, the first time that we do that, which is coming very soon, it's going to hit different. You ever hear that term? This is a Gen Z term. I was like, yo, that hits different.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Playing live, that's going to hit different. I think, you're going to get a different Lesotho than you've probably heard on the record, that you'll probably see in that live performance video that we did in the studio. I think it's just going to be its own entity. So for me, it's just perpetuating that and just finding new contexts in which to be able to push ourselves creatively. I'm going to keep writing music with these guys for as long as I can.
Yeah, same here. I think foreseeable future for me, I just want to keep going. I want to keep writing and doing what we've done again and again and getting better and better. Keep refining our sound and making it like more and more what you can. And I think we can do this without even trying, is like, we're going to put out a Lesotho album and it's going to sound like us, you know? Again. So no matter what we do, it's always going to be there because it's us three, you know? That's the kind of the beauty of it all. But you know, don't get comfortable kind of thing. Like, that's the thing I'm trying not to do, is like, always push yourself, always find new inspiration and keep the ball rolling in new and different ways. And I think this new track we've been writing recently, and we finished up one like a month ago or whatever. It's different, you know, and it has different elements than what you see or hear on the record. And I think because we're getting like more and more comfortable with each other and familiar with our sound. But there are some really like sparse parts, and then some of the chord loaded parts and riffs that are in Summer Wars. It's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting because that little nugget at the end of that, like the newest song that I'm talking about, it sort of goes down in steps like we've been doing in the album, but in a different way, and an even more somber way, even more sparse way that I was excited about, because I was like, this is new. We haven't done this before. Let's keep going, you know?
Nice. I love that idea. I mean, I would hate to see you guys stop, because it would be a tragedy. You're one of the new bands that really counts and matters, and I get it. Most people don't know about you because this is the nature of the business. There's way too many things out there. There's way too many channels on YouTube. There's so many different ways to get lost in the mix. But I think you guys are really worthy of being remembered. You know what I mean? And so my last question for you would be this: is what would it take for you to believe that you've had a successful career?
Just that, for me personally, as long as some people, or as long as whoever listens to it is able to sort of derive some sort of emotion, whether it's sacrifice, whether it's resolve, both of which you've mentioned, whether it's pain, whether it's anger, sadness, the whole spectrum of emotions, as long as you can draw something from that, that's important to me. And that's what I consider successful, when your art resonates. And I don't know, the way that I kind of see it is like, it's almost like each song is like a short story, almost like, and we're the authors of said short story, and we can take left and right turns and, you know, different plot twists and things like that. But also have the freedom to revisit that. So for me to be successful is to continue, and also to share it with as many people as possible.
Yeah.
That's it's funny. Like, each song is like lifting a bit of weight each time, is being like, you finish that song like we just did with that newest one, and it's like, fuck, that was like, can it happen again or whatever? You know, it's like,
it's like every time we're successful with something, and we're like, yo, this is like, we did this. And then it's like, yo, like, can we like top this? Like,
can we do this again?
The answer is yes, you can. Right.
So just having that feeling again and again, and then doing an album, man, is like my main goal right now, is to make an album feel like how you described our EP in the beginning, is like, it's got this feeling of a bookend, and it feels complete. Like, that was the biggest compliment I could have heard from the album, is like, a journey straight through it. So we're trying to do that, just in bigger volume. So I think it's like being able to take bigger bites and bigger bites.
You're reading my mind, Kyle. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but you're reading my mind, because the first thing I thought of, I looked at it and I said, oh, this is 4 songs, right? Oh, it's an EP. But it feels like an encyclopedia. And I don't mean like it feels heavy or burdened, but it's not a short story. It's not a Reader's Digest. It's 4 books that have been compiled and placed together, and they make sense, and they tell a story, even if you don't know what the story is.
Totally, man. That's the goal. That's the goal for an album, you know, is to be able to look at it and be like, these are nice, neat volumes that I can remember and carry with me, to feel a certain way. Like I put on bands all the time that I'm like, I know if I listen to this, I'm going to feel like this, and I love it. I'm going to put that on, and I want to be in that for somebody,
for real.
And for myself too. I definitely play this music because I like to listen to it, and I like going back and hearing what we've done too. So it's for everybody. It's everybody that's involved and everybody who will listen. I appreciate. It's been a good time, like writing this shit and recording the album. So just keep doing that, and I'll be happy as a clown.
Yeah. Any final words for me? I'd love to know what your takeaways are this experience today.
Dude,
this was thank awesome. You so much, man. Yeah. You have spoken so highly of us. I've never received such compliments for.
It's real.
I do just to express myself in this way. So I appreciate you taking the time, and really giving the album a listen, and giving your honest thoughts about it, because that's kind of what we want. We want a certain level of introspection with the music, even though it's such an expressive thing that we do. It's very weird. We work in inverses in certain ways, just as humans. The human condition is a very unique experience, and to be able to share it with someone in that way is really cool. So thank you so much, Rob.